He thought she was worthless, but he had no idea what she was capable of. The office was buzzing with the usual chaos, the kind of chaos that made outsiders think this was the heart of some billion-dollar empire. Plush leather chairs, glass walls that reflected the city skyline, and the constant hum of phones and keyboards created an illusion of organized chaos. In the center of it all sat Jonathan Steele, the billionaire CEO, leaning back in his chair with an air of arrogance that could have cut glass. He wasn't speaking, yet his presence alone commanded the room. Staffers scurried around him, bringing reports, pitching ideas, hoping for even the smallest nod of approval. But he hardly noticed any of it. He rarely did. For Jonathan, attention was currency, and he was stingy with it. And then there was Sarah. She wasn't part of the flashy, high-achieving circle that the CEO had handpicked as his favorites. She wasn't loud, she didn't wear expensive suits that screamed status, and she never strutted around pretending she owned the place. She moved quietly, almost like a shadow, blending into the background while everyone else tried desperately to shine in Jonathan's gaze. She was meticulous, dedicated, and quietly brilliant, but in a room full of people shouting for recognition, brilliance alone went unnoticed. Every day, Sarah arrived early before the rest of the office even stirred awake, and stayed late long after the final lights flickered off. She spent hours buried in research, analyzing market trends, contacting potential clients, and piecing together deals that had the potential to bring in millions. She worked tirelessly, not for praise, not for recognition, but because she believed in her own ability, in her own vision. And yet, in Jonathan's eyes, she was invisible, just another employee in a sea of faces. The other employees had noticed this. Some whispered among themselves while trying to stay discreet. Why even bother? They'd mutter as they watched her quietly working away. He'll never notice her. Why waste your energy? Their tone was a mix of pity and cynicism, a reflection of the office culture that valued theatrics over substance. But Sarah never let it bother her. She had long ago learned that true impact didn't come from being seen. It came from making a difference where it counted, quietly, deliberately, and without fanfare. Jonathan, for his part, was preoccupied with the kind of deals that made headlines, the ones that were flashy, dramatic, and guaranteed to boost his own ego. He thrived on the attention of the media, on the envy of competitors, and on the constant reminder to the world that he was untouchable. The concept of a quiet employee making waves behind the scenes was foreign to him, almost laughable. He couldn't fathom that someone who didn't demand the spotlight could accomplish anything that mattered. But Sarah wasn't thinking about him. She wasn't playing the game the way the office expected. While everyone else sought approval and recognition, she focused on results. Each email she sent, each call she made, each document she prepared was a careful, deliberate step toward something far bigger than office politics or fleeting approval. And in her careful, calculated manner, she began to build a network, a strategy, a pathway to success that was invisible to everyone around her, especially Jonathan. There were moments when she paused, rubbing her eyes late into the night, staring at spreadsheets and proposals with a level of intensity that could intimidate anyone who dared to look. And yet, there was also a glimmer of excitement in her eyes, a quiet thrill at knowing that every small action she took was a step toward a bigger goal. Every contact she made, every number she crunched, every late-night brainstorming session, it was all part of a plan that she knew would eventually turn the tables. The office buzzed with chatter and laughter during the day, but Sarah's workspace was a sanctuary of focus. Papers stacked neatly, post-it notes filled with ideas and contacts, and a computer screen constantly displaying emails and analytics. Colleagues would walk by and glance at her with mild curiosity, some shaking their heads with thinly veiled doubt, others with quiet admiration they dared not express aloud. Her determination was almost palpable, a silent force that seemed to radiate from her, even when Jonathan's eyes were elsewhere, absorbed in his own world of power plays and ego-driven deals. Occasionally, Jonathan would glance her way, usually only to dismiss her existence with a flicker of his hand or a brief, disinterested stare. To him, she was background noise, an afterthought, a minor character in a story that revolved entirely around his own grandeur. But what he didn't know, what no one in that office fully understood, was that Sarah was playing a different game entirely. While he chased applause, attention, and accolades, she was quietly positioning herself for the moment when the real power would reveal itself. And it wouldn't come from arrogance or noise. It would come from results, strategy, and vision. As the hours dragged on, the whispers continued. She's working herself to the bone for nothing. He'll never see her potential. Why even try? But Sarah ignored them all. She had long learned that the world's doubts were irrelevant compared to her own belief in her abilities. Every keystroke, every phone call, every meticulously crafted proposal was a piece of a puzzle that only she could see fully. And though Jonathan remained oblivious, she knew that one day, when the moment was right, the results of her silent work would speak louder than any speech, any presentation, or any boastful act of his. By the end of the day, the office lights dimmed, leaving only Sarah's desk illuminated by the soft glow of her computer screen. The city skyline outside reflected 1,000 twinkling lights, mirroring the myriad possibilities that lay ahead. She leaned back slightly, eyes scanning the numbers and emails, a faint smile tugging at her lips, not arrogance, not pride, but quiet confidence. The work was far from done, and yet she could feel that the foundation she was laying would soon shake the very pillars of the office hierarchy, of which Jonathan was so blindly confident. And as she packed her things, preparing to leave yet another late night behind, there was an unmistakable sense of anticipation in the air. A storm was quietly brewing, a shift in power that would catch everyone off guard. Jonathan Steele, arrogant, dismissive, and completely unaware, would soon face the consequences of underestimating someone he thought was insignificant. And Sarah, calm, calculated, and quietly brilliant, would finally step out from the shadows, though not yet, not until the moment was perfect. Little did anyone know, the real story was just beginning, and behind closed doors, Sarah's plan was already in motion, waiting to unfold in a way that would leave the entire office, and especially Jonathan, completely stunned. Sarah leaned back slightly in her chair, the soft glow of her computer screen reflecting off her eyes, and for just a moment, a tiny, knowing smile curved across her lips. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone watching, but in that small expression lay an entire universe of calculated intent, of plans so precise that only she could understand the full magnitude of what was about to unfold. The office, still buzzing with the residual chaos of the day, remained completely unaware of the storm quietly brewing in their midst. Everyone from the flashy assistants scrambling with their portfolios to the overconfident managers boasting about minor achievements remained completely blind to what Sarah had been orchestrating behind the scenes. Jonathan Steele, the billionaire CEO whose arrogance filled the room like a dense fog, was, as usual, completely absorbed in his own world. He barely glanced at her, more preoccupied with checking stock fluctuations on his tablet and reviewing flashy proposals from his so-called top performers. To him, Sarah was still background noise, a minor, almost insignificant figure who could be safely ignored while he basked in his own self-importance. He didn't notice the subtle confidence in her posture, didn't see the quiet energy emanating from her as she went about her work with meticulous precision. And yet, Sarah had been quietly observing everything for weeks. Every interaction, every email, every deal pitched by her colleagues had been noted, analyzed, and stored away in her mental ledger. She had seen the patterns, understood the blind spots in the CEO's approach, and recognized opportunities that no one else even dreamed existed. While the rest of the office had been focused on superficial displays of competence, raising their voices in meetings, showing off to clients, or flaunting their expensive tastes, Sarah had been building something invisible, intangible, yet infinitely more powerful, a plan that could upend the entire hierarchy of the office and prove that true influence came not from noise, but from results. As she scrolled through her documents one final time, her smile widened slightly, not in triumph, but in quiet satisfaction at the knowledge that the next steps were ready to be executed. Each proposal she had drafted was polished, every potential client contact carefully nurtured, every detail double-checked with painstaking accuracy. This wasn't mere luck or last-minute improvisation. It was the product of countless late nights, early mornings, and a relentless dedication that no one around her had ever witnessed or even considered. And as she glanced around the office, catching snippets of conversations and overhearing dismissive remarks, she felt a surge of quiet amusement. No one suspected that the very person they ignored, the one they had labeled insignificant, held the key to a game-changing outcome that would leave them all stunned. Her fingers hovered briefly over the keyboard, the cursor blinking patiently, almost as if it were a drumbeat counting down to the moment of revelation. She could feel the tension in the room without anyone noticing, like the air itself was holding its breath. The intern scuttled past, unaware of the gravity of the quiet storm brewing beside them. Managers debated trivial numbers, confident in their assumed superiority. And Jonathan, oblivious, completely absorbed in his own reflection of importance. It was the perfect storm of underestimation, a blind spot that Sarah had learned to exploit. In that moment, the faint smile on her lips conveyed something far deeper than mere satisfaction. It was a symbol of patience, of resilience, of a strategic mind that had understood the rules of the game far better than anyone else. She didn't need applause or acknowledgement, she needed results. And the results were nearly ready. Soon, very soon, the office would feel the tremors of her careful planning, and Jonathan, the man who had underestimated her every step of the way, would finally realize the cost of his arrogance. The documents in front of her weren't just spreadsheets or proposals. They were carefully constructed instruments of influence, meticulously designed to capture attention, secure commitments, and create a ripple effect that would reverberate far beyond the walls of the office. Every figure, every strategy, every carefully worded paragraph had been placed with a precision that would make even the most seasoned executives pause in awe. This wasn't just work. It was a masterclass in subtle power, executed silently but with devastating potential. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes scanning the final details one more time. A flicker of anticipation passed across her face, not fear, not doubt, but excitement. She knew the moment she had been working toward for weeks was almost upon her. The plan was set, the pieces were in place, and the only thing left to do was wait for the right moment to activate it. And when that moment came, the reaction would be instantaneous. Gasps, whispered exclamations, stunned faces, and a shift in power that would leave Jonathan momentarily speechless. It would all happen exactly as she had anticipated. Her smile grew a fraction wider, and she leaned back once more, letting out a quiet, almost imperceptible breath. The kind of breath that carries the weight of someone who knows they are about to change everything. The office continued its hum of activity, but Sarah's mind was elsewhere, already running through the scenarios, imagining the astonishment on faces she had long been told would never notice her. Every dismissive glance she had endured, every snide comment, every roll of an eye was suddenly transformed into fuel for her impending triumph. She knew instinctively that people like Jonathan could not anticipate someone who worked quietly, methodically, and without ego. They were blind to subtle power, accustomed only to the loud, the flashy, and the arrogant. And that blindness was her advantage. It was the perfect opportunity, the kind that only comes to those patient enough to wait, smart enough to plan, and disciplined enough to act when the moment is just right. Sarah's gaze fell one last time on the documents, and a faint smirk crossed her face as she imagined the astonishment that would soon ripple through the office. She allowed herself a quiet chuckle, not loud, not theatrical, but soft, controlled, and filled with the satisfaction of someone who knows exactly what is coming next. For while the world around her remained oblivious, her plan was ready, poised to explode in impact, and nothing could stop it. And just as she stood, carefully stacking her papers, there was a quiet sense in the air, a subtle tension that no one else could feel. It was as if the office itself was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Jonathan, arrogant and blind, would soon learn a lesson he had long ignored, that true power often comes not from visibility, but from the unseen, from the patient, the clever, the underestimated. Little did anyone know, she had a plan that would shock the entire office. And in that moment Sarah walked away from her desk, leaving the office buzzing, oblivious, and completely unprepared for the storm she was about to unleash. Watch Part 2 to see what she did behind closed doors.